I'm gonna do you like baby them did me. Yeah. I'll never forget that day. Yeah, no, they was all in the kitchen. I was scared. It was cool. There was about this many too in that bit. I never forget the word. Suck Lil Wayne.
What if one of the greatest rappers alive didn't just survive the streets, but survived something far darker? What if the story we were sold as hip-hop's greatest father-son success was actually built on silence, fear, and trauma? Today isn't about rumors. It's not about internet gossip. It's about words that came straight out of Lil Wayne's own mouth, captured on camera, and replayed for years without anyone stopping to really listen. Before the Grammys, before the platinum plaques, before the tattoos, the lean, and the legend, there was a child, an 11-year-old kid from Hollygrove who trusted the wrong adults in an industry that doesn't protect children, the same industry that calls exploitation mentorship and abuse love. For decades, fans laughed off the kisses, defended the behavior, made excuses. But when you connect the dots, Wayne's own testimony, eyewitness accounts, documented trauma, addiction, and a suicide attempt at 12, the story changes completely. This isn't an attack. This isn't a hit piece. This is a conversation hip-hop avoided for far too long. Because sometimes the truth isn't hidden. It's right in front of us, normalized, broadcasted, and ignored. And once you hear this story the right way, you can't unhear it. Before the world ever knew him as Lil Wayne, before the money, the fame, the influence, there was just a kid from Hollygrove, a small, quiet neighborhood in New Orleans where survival mattered more than dreams. Dwayne Michael Carter Jr. grew up surrounded by chaos, poverty, and violence, raised by a mother doing everything she could to protect her son in an environment that offered very little protection to young black boys. His biological father was absent early on, leaving a gap that Wayne would spend his entire childhood trying to fill. That absence matters because when a child is missing a parent, especially a father figure, they become vulnerable in ways most people don't understand until it's too late. In the early 1990s, New Orleans was one of the most dangerous cities in America. Drugs flooded the streets, violence was routine, and opportunities for kids like Wayne were almost non-existent. Then came Cash Money Records, flashy cars, jewelry, studio access, a promise of escape. Brian "Birdman" Williams didn't just show up as a music executive. He entered Wayne's life as something much deeper. Someone who offered structure, attention, validation, and what looked like unconditional support. For a child who felt abandoned, that kind of presence can feel like salvation. And Wayne was barely in elementary school when he was introduced to the label. By the time he was around 11 years old, he was already signed, recording, and being groomed for stardom. While other kids were worrying about school and friends, Wayne was surrounded by adults, studio sessions, street conversations, and expectations no child should ever carry. The music industry doesn't slow down for childhood, it consumes it. Birdman publicly positioned himself as Wayne's father figure almost immediately. He called him son in interviews. He took him everywhere. He dressed him, housed him, and made sure the world saw them as family. Eventually, Birdman even claimed to have adopted Wayne, a statement that was repeated for years despite no public legal records ever confirming it. Whether official or not, the emotional adoption had already happened. Wayne believed it. He lived it. He internalized it. This is where things become complicated because on the surface, the story looked inspirational. A powerful man rescues a talented child from the streets and turns him into a star. That narrative is one hip-hop has celebrated for decades. But behind that story, there were signs that something wasn't right. Boundaries were blurred, roles were confused, and behavior that made outsiders uncomfortable was brushed off as culture, loyalty, or love. As Wayne grew into his teenage years, the relationship between artist and mentor became increasingly intense. Wayne showed devotion publicly and permanently. Tattoos, statements, lyrics. He removed his biological father's name from his identity and replaced it with the man who raised him in the industry. That level of attachment doesn't come from business. It comes from emotional dependency. Multiple people who were around Cash Money during that era have spoken over the years about behavior they witnessed that felt off, Not rumors from the internet, but accounts from artists, affiliates, and industry figures who were physically present. Affection that seemed selective, attention that wasn't equally distributed. Actions that cross lines most people instinctively recognize, especially when children are involved. Public moments fueled those concerns. Televised appearances, magazine photos, award show footage. Moments that made viewers uncomfortable even without context. At the time, many fans laughed it off or defended it. Hip-hop has a long history of normalizing behavior if it comes from someone powerful enough. Questioning it meant questioning success itself. But when you step back and look at the pattern, the image changes. Wayne wasn't just an artist. He was a child placed in an adult world without protection. He was praised for being mature beyond his years, which is often code for a child being forced to grow up too fast. He was surrounded by people who benefited financially from his talent, while he depended on them for guidance, safety, and identity. As Wayne aged, the emotional toll started to show. He's spoken openly about mental health struggles, pain, and trauma that trace back to his childhood. He's connected his early experiences to long-term consequences, including addiction and self-destructive behavior. These aren't random outcomes. They're common in people who experience boundary violations at a young age, especially when those experiences were normalized instead of addressed. One of the most alarming revelations came years later, when Wayne described a childhood incident on camera in a documentary setting. He spoke casually, almost jokingly, about an experience that happened when he was around 11. But behind the tone was something much darker. Fear, confusion, adults present, a situation no child should ever be placed in. The fact that Wayne shared it without fully labeling it as harmful doesn't make it harmless. In fact, that's often how trauma presents itself when it's never been processed. Psychologists have long explained that children who experience trauma, especially when authority figures are involved, often reframe it as normal or even positive. It's a survival mechanism. Admitting the truth would mean confronting betrayal from the very people they depended on. For a child whose entire career, lifestyle, and sense of belonging came from that environment, the cost of acknowledgement can feel unbearable. What makes this story even more disturbing is the timing. Around the same period as those childhood experiences, Wayne attempted to take his own life. He was only 12 years old. That isn't something a child does without deep internal pain. While Wayne has explained that incident in different ways over the years, the timeline raises serious questions that can't be ignored. As his career exploded, the industry celebrated the product while ignoring the person. Wayne became one of the most influential rappers of all time, redefining lyricism, flow, and work ethic. But success didn't erase the damage. If anything, it buried it deeper. Addiction followed. Health crises followed. Legal trouble followed. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the spotlight gets brighter. For years, the public was encouraged to see the relationship between Wayne and Birdman as iconic. But icons can be misleading. What looks like loyalty can be dependency. What looks like love can be control. And what looks like opportunity can sometimes be exploitation wrapped in success. This is only the beginning of the story, because what happened behind the scenes didn't stay in Wayne's childhood. It followed him into adulthood, into business dealings, into lawsuits, into public fallouts, and into moments where the mask finally slipped. The father-son image cracked, and what emerged raised questions far bigger than music. And once those questions start, they don't stop. As Lil Wayne grew older, the power dynamics didn't disappear. They evolved. What once looked like mentorship turned into control, and what was framed as family loyalty slowly began to resemble something far more transactional. Wayne wasn't just emotionally tied to Birdman anymore. He was legally, financially, and creatively bound to him. Cash Money didn't just own Wayne's early career, it owned his future. For years, Wayne delivered hit after hit, carrying the label on his back. While other artists came and went, Wayne stayed. He worked relentlessly, releasing music at a pace few could match. Mixtapes flooded the streets. Albums dominated the charts. Cash Money's success became inseparable from Wayne's voice. Yet behind the scenes, cracks were forming. Despite being the label's biggest asset, Wayne began to realize he didn't truly own his work. Contracts signed when he was still young locked him into agreements that favored the people in power. Money disputes started surfacing quietly at first, royalties delayed, promises broken, respect withheld. For someone who had been raised to believe loyalty was everything, this felt like betrayal on a level deeper than business. The public fallout didn't happen overnight. It simmered. Wayne's lyrics started to change. Interviews became tense. The warmth he once showed Birdman disappeared, replaced by carefully chosen words and visible frustration. When Wayne openly admitted that he felt like a prisoner in his own deal, fans were stunned. The man who once called Birdman his father was now describing their relationship as suffocating. Then came the lawsuits. Wayne sued Cash Money for tens of millions of dollars, accusing the label of withholding money and intentionally blocking the release of his album. For hip-hop fans, this moment shattered the image they'd been sold for decades. This wasn't a family dispute. This was war, and wars don't start unless something fundamental breaks. What made the situation even more painful was Wayne's emotional conflict. Even while fighting in court, he struggled to fully separate himself. Years of conditioning don't disappear easily. Wayne spoke about confusion, hurt, and disappointment, not anger. He wasn't just losing a business partner. He was losing the man he believed saved his life. Psychologically, this is where childhood trauma often resurfaces. When someone grows up depending on a powerful figure for survival, leaving them can feel like losing oxygen. Even when the relationship becomes harmful, the attachment remains. Wayne's public hesitation, his mixed emotions, and his silence on certain topics all fit this pattern. As the legal battle dragged on, Wayne's health worsened. Seizures, hospitalizations, near-death moments. Stress, addiction, and unresolved trauma collided. Doctors warned him. Fans worried. The industry watched. Yet the machine kept moving. Tours continued. Features dropped. The pressure never stopped. During this time, Wayne began distancing himself more clearly. He stopped wearing Cash Money branding. He avoided public appearances with Birdman. He made it clear that the relationship was fractured beyond repair. When the lawsuit finally settled, it wasn't celebrated. It felt more like an escape than a victory. But escaping a contract doesn't mean escaping the past. Wayne's openness about mental health increased in the years that followed. He spoke about depression, about feeling numb, about struggling with self-worth despite global fame. These admissions weren't random. They were pieces of a much larger story, one where success didn't heal wounds formed in childhood. What's striking is how long the industry ignored the warning signs. From the beginning, Wayne was praised for being grown at an age when no child should be. He was placed in adult environments, adult conversations, adult pressures, and adult relationships. Instead of protecting him, the industry rewarded the people who benefited from his talent. And Wayne wasn't alone. When fans began re-examining his story, they noticed familiar patterns across the industry. Young artists, powerful mentors, early contracts, blurred boundaries, emotional dependence, exploitation disguised as opportunity. Wayne's experience wasn't an exception. It was a template. What makes his story particularly painful is that the evidence was always there. Public footage, recorded interviews, lyrics that hinted at pain long before he explained it outright. The world just wasn't ready to listen. Or maybe it didn't want to. Even today, Wayne rarely speaks directly about certain aspects of his childhood. Silence can mean many things. Sometimes it means peace. Sometimes it means unresolved pain. Sometimes it means protection of oneself or of others. Survivors often choose silence not because nothing happened, but because speaking would reopen wounds they've spent a lifetime trying to close. When Wayne looks back now, he doesn't frame his life as a tragedy. He speaks with gratitude for surviving, for creating, for influencing a generation. That strength is real, but strength doesn't erase harm. It coexists with it. The hip-hop community still debates this story. Some defend Birdman fiercely, others question everything. But the point isn't choosing sides. The point is recognizing what happens when children are placed into systems built for profit, not protection. When loyalty is demanded instead of earned. When power goes unchecked. Lil Wayne's legacy is undeniable. He changed music forever. But his personal journey forces a difficult conversation, one about how many legends paid an unseen price for their success. How many were shaped, controlled, or damaged before they ever had a chance to choose who they wanted to be. This isn't about rewriting history. It's about finally reading it honestly. Because when you understand what Wayne survived, his resilience hits differently. And when you realize how long the industry looked away, the silence becomes impossible to ignore. And this still isn't the end, because the ripple effects of that childhood didn't stop with Wayne. They influenced how he mentored others, how he viewed loyalty, and how the cycle nearly repeated itself. That's where the next part begins, Dot. When Lil Wayne finally stepped into his own power, he didn't just leave cash money behind. He tried to build something different, something safer, something that, at least in his mind, would give young artists what he never truly had: choice, support, and freedom. That vision became Young Money Entertainment. On the surface, it looked like a redemption arc. Wayne discovered and elevated a new generation of talent: Drake, Nicki Minaj, Tyga, artists who would go on to dominate charts, culture, and global conversations. Wayne positioned himself not as a controller but as a guide. He called them family. He invested in their creativity. He gave them space to develop their own identities. But trauma has a way of quietly shaping behavior, even when intentions are good. Wayne had learned loyalty before boundaries, sacrifice before self-preservation, grind before rest. Those values powered his success, but they also carried risks. Young artists under his wing worked relentlessly. Expectations were high. The pace was brutal. While Wayne never mirrored the same public behaviors that once raised concern in his own childhood, the emotional framework of "we're family, so we push through anything" remained. This is how cycles continue, not through identical actions, but through inherited systems. Wayne's health issues worsened during this period. Seizures became more frequent. Hospitalizations became headlines. Each scare reminded fans that the body keeps score, even when the mind tries to move forward. Stress, addiction, exhaustion, and unresolved trauma don't disappear just because someone becomes the boss. Behind the scenes, Wayne was still fighting demons that fame couldn't touch. He spoke about feeling disconnected from happiness, about struggling to feel present, about music being both his escape and his cage. These admissions gave fans a glimpse into the cost of surviving without healing. At the same time, his relationship with his protégés showed something important. Wayne encouraged them to speak up, to negotiate, to take breaks, to eventually grow beyond him if needed. That alone marked a difference. When Drake and Nicki became global stars, Wayne didn't block their shine. He celebrated it. He stepped back when necessary. That matters because it shows awareness, even if imperfect, of what he wished he'd had. Still, the industry pressure never eased. Wayne was expected to be superhuman, a living legend who never slowed down. Every comeback was met with demands for more. Every pause was treated like weakness. In hip-hop, vulnerability often gets punished. As years passed, fans began reassessing Wayne's story with new eyes. Cultural conversations shifted. People became more willing to discuss mental health, power dynamics, and exploitation. Clips once dismissed as jokes were re-examined. Interviews once overlooked were replayed with context. This wasn't about canceling anyone. It was about understanding how systems fail children. Wayne himself remained cautious. He didn't lead the conversation. He didn't accuse. He didn't expose. Survivors often choose control over chaos, and silence can be a form of control. Speaking publicly can feel like reliving everything all over again, especially when the world is ready to argue instead of listen. What Wayne did do was focus on survival, on longevity, on staying alive long enough to see another chapter. He reduced touring, adjusted his lifestyle, took health warnings more seriously. These choices didn't erase the past, but they suggested growth. And then something unexpected happened. Wayne began to reconnect, carefully, selectively, with parts of his own story. He talked about forgiveness, about not wanting bitterness to define him. Forgiveness, however, doesn't mean denial. It often means choosing peace without reopening wounds. For fans, that can be frustrating. People want clarity, villains, heroes, clean endings. But real life rarely provides those. Trauma stories are messy. They live in gray areas where love and harm can coexist, where gratitude and pain sit side by side. What's undeniable is this. Lil Wayne survived an environment that has destroyed countless others. He turned pain into influence. He broke records while quietly carrying damage most people never see. That doesn't excuse the systems that failed him. It exposes them. And his story forces a larger question. How many artists didn't make it far enough to tell theirs? The industry still signs kids young, still blurs lines, still prioritizes profit over protection. Contracts are still complex. Power imbalances still exist. Wayne's experience didn't end these practices, but it gave future artists a reference point, a warning, a lesson. In recent years, younger musicians have become more vocal about ownership, boundaries, and mental health. That shift didn't come from nowhere. It came from watching legends struggle publicly, from seeing success paired with suffering. Wayne may never label his past in the way outsiders want him to, and that's his right. Survivors get to choose how their story is told. What matters is that the conversation finally exists, and that it's no longer taboo to ask hard questions. When fans revisit Wayne's music now, they hear it differently. The hunger, the pain, the exhaustion behind the bravado. Lyrics that once sounded like flexing now feel like coping. That doesn't diminish the art, it deepens it. Lil Wayne isn't just a rap icon, he's a case study in what happens when talent meets unchecked power too early, when love and control blur, when survival becomes the priority long before healing is possible. And yet he's still here, still creating, still influencing, still standing. That alone says something powerful. Because survival doesn't mean the damage never happened. It means it didn't win. And in the final part, we talk about what this story ultimately teaches. About hip-hop, about fame, and about the responsibility we all share when children are watching. If this story made you pause, even for a second, then it did its job. Hip-hop isn't just music. It's lived experiences, real people, and real consequences that often get hidden behind fame and success. Legends don't just rise overnight. They're shaped by systems, decisions, and moments the public never sees. If you believe these stories deserve to be told with honesty, respect, and depth, then make sure you're part of this community. Like this video so more people see it. Subscribe to the channel if you want real hip-hop stories that go beyond headlines and surface-level takes. And most importantly, drop a comment. Do you think the industry has changed, or is it still repeating the same cycles? Share this video with someone who loves hip-hop history because these conversations matter. The more we talk about power, protection, and accountability, the harder it becomes to ignore. This isn't about tearing anyone down. It's about learning from the past so the next generation doesn't pay the same price. More stories are coming. Deeper dives, untold truths. Stay locked in.